You were taught that the closer someone is to you, the safer you are, that loyalty protects, that love shields, that the people who know you best would never be the ones to break you. But reality doesn't work like that. The more access someone has to you, the more they see your patterns, your limits, your soft spots. And over time, what once felt like connection quietly turns into leverage. Not always with bad intentions, but inevitably. Because when people stop fearing your absence, they start testing your presence. They speak more freely, take more liberties, expect more without asking. And you let it happen because you call it love. But here's the truth. Most people never admit love doesn't make people fair. It makes you exposed. It lowers your guard, blurs your judgment, and convinces you to tolerate what you would never accept from anyone else. I will show you how to take back control without losing yourself, how to care without becoming predictable, and how to build boundaries so sharp they reset how others treat you. If you're ready to see what's really happening beneath your relationships, hit like, subscribe, and don't miss what comes next. Because now we're going to break down the hidden rules of power where love and control collide. The moment you feel safe with someone is usually the moment you stop thinking clearly, you stop measuring, you stop watching patterns, you start assuming they wouldn't do that to me. And that assumption is where power quietly leaves your hands. Because safety doesn't erase human nature, it just removes your defenses against it. When someone knows you won't retaliate, won't walk away, won't enforce consequence, your value stops being negotiated and starts being consumed. Not always with intention, but always with effect. This is the mechanism most people never see. Familiarity rewires perception. The more access someone has to you, the less they filter themselves around you. Your patience becomes expected. Your forgiveness becomes automatic. Your presence becomes permanent in their mind. And permanence kills urgency. When there's no risk of losing you, there's no reason to respect your limits. You think you're building closeness. What you're actually doing is removing friction. And friction is what maintains structure in any relationship. Watch how it plays out. You say yes when you're tired. You explain when you're disrespected. You tolerate small things to keep the peace. Old version. It's okay. I understand. I don't want to make it a big deal. Disciplined version. Silence, distance, no immediate reaction, no lecture, no emotional spill, just a shift in access. The first response teaches them you absorb pressure. The second teaches them pressure has a cost, and people always adjust to cost faster than they respond to words. This is why Machiavelli never trusted emotional comfort, because once someone feels too comfortable around you, they stop seeing you as someone they can lose. And once that fear disappears, something else replaces it: entitlement. Not loud, not obvious, subtle. It sounds like expectation, it looks like assumption, it feels like they've already decided your role in their life without asking you. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The danger isn't the enemy who opposes you, it's the person who feels secure enough to take you for granted. You don't lose control in conflict, you lose it in comfort. And once you see that, you start watching everything differently. So, what happens after comfort turns into entitlement? It doesn't explode. It evolves quietly. At first, they appreciate you. Then, they expect you. And eventually, they rely on you without respecting you. This is where most people get confused, because nothing looks wrong on the surface. No betrayal, no conflict, just a subtle shift in behavior. They stop thanking you, stop checking if it's okay, stop considering your limits. Why? Because in their mind, your loyalty has already been secured, not earned, secured. This is the psychological pivot. When someone believes your presence is guaranteed, they stop investing in maintaining it. Your consistency becomes their convenience. And convenience is the fastest way to devalue anything. You think you're being reliable, they start seeing you as available. You think you're being supportive, they start assuming you'll always adapt. And once that assumption locks in, your boundaries don't get negotiated, they get bypassed. Watch the pattern closely. You finally say no, you pull back, you protect your time. And suddenly, you're the problem. You've changed. You're being distant. Why are you acting like this? Old response, you explain. Justify, soften the boundary. I just need some space. I didn't mean anything by it. Disciplined response, calm, minimal, unmoved. I'm not available for that. No defense, no emotional cushioning, just clarity. The first invites negotiation. The second ends it. Because what they're reacting to isn't your behavior. It's the loss of control they had over your behavior. And that loss creates friction. That friction creates resistance. Not because they don't care about you, but because they were benefiting from a version of you that required no accountability. That's the part no one wants to admit. People don't just get used to your kindness, they build systems around it. This is why guilt becomes their primary tool. The moment you set a limit, they bring up history. After everything I've done for you, you weren't like this before. It sounds emotional, but it's strategic. Because if they can make you feel guilty, they can make you reverse your decision. And if you reverse it once, they log it. Not consciously, but permanently. Now they know your boundary is flexible, and anything flexible will be tested again. This is not love. This is leverage disguised as emotion. And if you can't hold your position when pressure becomes emotional, then you never had control to begin with. So now the question changes. Not, do they care about you, but what version of you are they used to controlling? Because that answer will tell you exactly why they react the way they do when you stop playing your old role. And then comes the pattern that traps most people without them ever realizing it, the loyalty loop. You stay consistent. You show up. You support you, forgive you, remain available. At first, it feels like strength, like integrity, like you're being someone they can depend on. But when that consistency isn't matched, something shifts. Not in you, in how they perceive you. Your effort stops being respected and starts being expected. And once it's expected, it loses all weight. This is the hidden mechanism. Humans don't assign value based on what you give. They assign value based on what they could lose. If your loyalty is constant, predictable, and unconditional, there's nothing to lose. And when there's nothing to lose, there's nothing to protect. So they stop checking in. They stop reciprocating. They show up when it benefits them, disappear when it doesn't. Not because they've turned against you, but because your presence no longer requires effort to maintain. Watch how it unfolds. You're always there. They start assuming you will be. You respond quickly. They stop responding at all. You prioritize them. They start placing you lower. Old response, you double down. You give more. You try harder. Maybe they're just busy. Maybe I should reach out again. Discipline response, you withdraw without announcement. You reduce access. You observe. No confrontation, no emotional appeal, just a quiet recalibration of your availability. The first response reinforces your role. The second rewrites it. And when you pull back, something interesting happens. They notice. But not in the way you expect. They don't suddenly realize your value and apologize. They react. They question. They test. Why are you acting different? Everything okay? It sounds like concern, but it's not clarity they're seeking. It's confirmation. They're trying to see if the old version of you is still accessible, because what they lost wasn't you. It was the version of you that required nothing in return. This is where most people fail. They mistake that reaction for care. They reopen access too early. They explain. they soften, and just like that, the system resets. You return to being predictable, and predictable people are easy to manage. Machiavelli saw this clearly. Loyalty that is not measured becomes leverage for the other side, not because people are evil, but because they adapt to whatever requires the least resistance. And you made yourself effortless to keep. So understand this: consistency without consequence creates dependency without respect. And once that loop forms breaking, it will feel like betrayal to them, even though it's the first time you're actually protecting your position. That's when the real test begins. The real test doesn't come when everything is calm. It comes the moment you stop bending. Not in a dramatic way, not with confrontation. Just a simple shift. You say no, you don't adjust, you don't explain. And suddenly, everything that was quiet becomes tense. This is where pressure reveals structure. Because the moment you stop being flexible, people show you how much they relied on your flexibility. It often starts small. Can you just do this one thing? Can you let it slide this time? It sounds harmless. Temporary, reasonable, old response you accommodate. Yeah. It's not a big deal. Disciplined response, you hold your line. No, that doesn't work for me. No justification, no emotional tone, just final. And that's where the shift happens. Because when you give in, once you don't solve the situation, you define your pattern. You become the person who can be bent. And once that identity is assigned to you, it will be tested again and again and again. This is not about the request. It's about what your response teaches. People don't remember your words. They remember what you allow. And what you allow becomes the rule they operate under. So when you finally enforce something, it doesn't feel like a boundary to them. It feels like a violation of expectation. That's why they react. Not because you're wrong, but because you've disrupted a system that was working in their favor. And when that system breaks, they don't confront your logic. They attack your character. You're too cold. You've changed. You're overreacting. This is the flip. Your strength gets reframed as a flaw. Your clarity becomes cruelty. Your restraint becomes distance. Old response, you defend yourself. You soften your tone. I'm not trying to be harsh. I just feel like disciplined response. You say nothing, or you repeat your position once without emotion, without expansion. Then you hold it, because what they miss isn't your warmth. It's their access to the version of you that never enforced consequence. That's the uncomfortable truth. They don't resist your boundary because it hurts them. They resist it because it removes their advantage. And when advantage disappears, people rarely say, I was benefiting. They say, you've changed. Machiavelli understood this better than most. The closer someone is to you, the more they expect you to absorb what they bring emotionally, mentally, even behaviorally. And the moment you stop absorbing, they feel the impact of their own weight. That's why they push back. Not because you're wrong, but because they're no longer protected from the consequences of their own actions. So let them react, let them label, let them misinterpret. Because the moment you start adjusting your boundaries to protect their comfort, you go right back to being controlled. And control doesn't return loudly. It returns quietly through the same patterns you thought you had already outgrown. So the question becomes, how do you enforce without turning into someone you don't recognize? Because this is where most people hesitate. They feel the shift. They see the patterns. But the moment they start holding their ground, something inside them resists. Guilt, doubt, the need to explain. And that hesitation is exactly what reopens the door you just tried to close. The first principle is simple but uncomfortable. You stop explaining your distance. The moment you explain, you invite negotiation. I just need space because I've been feeling like old response, long messages, emotional clarity, trying to be understood. Disciplined response, I'm not available right now. That's it. No elaboration, no justification. Because the more you reveal your reasoning, the more they can work around it, question it, or use it to pull you back in. Silence, when controlled, is not avoidance. It's positioning. It forces others to deal with your decision instead of dissecting it. Then comes the second shift: consequences over conditions. Most people set verbal boundaries. Don't talk to me like that. Please respect my time. But those are requests, not structures, and requests rely on the other person's willingness to change. Machiavellian thinking doesn't rely on willingness, it creates cost. Old response: you warn, you repeat, you tolerate. Disciplined response: you act. They cross the line, you remove access. No speech, no escalation, just absence. And you don't return because they reacted, you return only if the behavior changes. That's the difference between emotional boundaries and structural boundaries. One asks, the other enforces. Third, you stop negotiating through emotion. The moment someone realizes they can trigger a reaction in you through silence, pressure, guilt, they stop engaging your logic and start targeting your feelings. Old response: you panic when they pull away, you rush to fix you, send the message you shouldn't send. Disciplined response: you slow down, you observe, you do nothing until clarity returns. Because speed is what exposes you. The faster you react, the more predictable you become, and predictability is where leverage is lost. Fourth, you define what you tolerate, and you don't adjust it based on who's asking. This is where most people break. They have standards, but those standards bend depending on history, emotion, or attachment. That inconsistency teaches others that your boundaries are optional, so you create rules that don't move. I don't engage when disrespected. I don't reward apologies without change. And once those rules are set, you follow them without exception. Not aggressively, not emotionally. Just consistently, because consistency is what turns a boundary into reality. And finally, you let go of the need to be seen as good. This is the hardest part, because your identity has been tied to being understanding, patient, fair. But those traits, when unmanaged, become openings. Machiavelli didn't fear being called harsh. He feared being seen as easy. And you should too. Because once you prioritize how you're perceived over how you're treated, you start negotiating against yourself. So you let them talk. You let them label. You let them misunderstand. Because power is not built on agreement. It's built on consistency. And once your behavior stops fluctuating based on their reaction, something changes. Not just in them, in you. And this is where most people confront the final resistance, the fear of becoming someone cold, distant, unrecognizable even to themselves. You start thinking, if I keep this up, will I lose my ability to care? That fear feels real, but it's based on a misunderstanding. Because being cold-blooded is not about removing emotion. It's about removing emotional impulsivity. It's not about feeling less. It's about letting feelings stop dictating your decisions. Right now, your reactions are tied to your emotions. Someone disrespects you, you react. Someone pulls away, you chase. Someone disappoints you, you spiral. That pattern doesn't come from love. It comes from lack of control over how you process what happens. Old response: why would they do this to me? Disciplined response: what does this reveal about them, and what does it require me to adjust? Same situation, different frame. And that shift in framing is where power begins. Machiavelli never taught people to become heartless. He taught them to separate feeling from action. You can feel everything and still move strategically. You can care deeply and still withdraw when necessary. The problem isn't your emotions. The problem is when your emotions become predictable triggers that others can use. Because once someone knows how you react under pressure, they stop respecting your mind and start managing your reactions. So you slow everything down. You stop reacting in real time. Someone crosses a line, you don't respond immediately. You observe. You create space. You let the situation breathe without your emotional input. And that silence, that pause, it unsettles people. Not because it's aggressive, but because it's unreadable, and what cannot be read cannot be controlled. You begin to see pain differently too, not as something personal, but as information. Someone betrays you. It's not just hurt, it's data. It tells you where your boundaries were too loose, where your trust was unearned. Someone distances themselves. It's not rejection, it's clarity about their level of investment. The cold-blooded mind doesn't collapse under these moments. It extracts from them, it catalogues, it adjusts access accordingly. This is how you protect your heart without closing it. You don't shut people out. You build a system that filters who gets in and who stays. Your warmth becomes selective. Your presence becomes conditional. Not out of cruelty, but out of self-command. Because anything given without condition will eventually be taken without respect. And yes, you will be misunderstood. You will be called distant, different, even selfish. But those labels don't come from truth. They come from people reacting to the loss of the version of you they could control. And once you accept that something shifts permanently, you stop trying to be seen correctly. You start acting correctly. And that is where control stops being something you chase and becomes something you hold. You already see it now. The moment you stop controlling yourself, someone else starts controlling the outcome. It shows up in small moments, when they question your change and you feel the urge to explain. When they pull away and you feel the need to fix it. When they label you cold and you want to correct their perception. That pressure builds fast. It feels almost automatic to respond, to clarify, to prove you are still the same. But if you hold your position, if you stay still, the frame shifts. They start adjusting. They speak more, reveal more, test less. Not because you convinced them, but because your silence removed their leverage. When you stop reacting, they lose the ability to guide your behavior. And without that control, their certainty breaks. This is the shift, from reaction to self-command, from impulse to discipline, from noise to clarity. You stop negotiating your boundaries and start enforcing them through consistency. No performance, no explanation, just structure. If this sharpened your perspective, subscribe and comment cold clarity. Because once you operate from control, you no longer need to be understood to be respected.